Welcome to the Beyond Barriers podcast. If you're an ambitious woman who wants to dominate your career, then you are in the right place. This podcast is co-hosted by Nikki Barua, digital innovator, serial entrepreneur, author, and speaker, and Monica Marquez, ex-Googler, diversity expert, and senior corporate leader. From inspiring stories to cutting-edge strategies, you'll learn how to develop the skill set, mindset, and tool set to get future-ready fast and accelerate your success.
Hi, I'm Nikki Barua, your host for today's episode. Have you ever felt like you were the only one dealing with challenges that you didn't know how to overcome? You know those moments when you didn't have an answer and wished you could get the wisdom and guidance of those who have walked that path before you? Meet Loren Feldman, former senior editor at Inc., Forbes, and New York Times, who shares his perspective on the power of community and what helps business leaders survive and thrive. Loren Feldman is the Chief Content Officer of 21 Hats, an online platform for business owners. He currently hosts the 21 Hats podcast and publishes the 21 Hats Morning Report, a daily email newsletter for entrepreneurs. Previously, he was a senior editor covering entrepreneurship at Inc., Forbes, and the New York Times, and hosted a call-in show for business owners, Mind Your Business, on SiriusXM. Loren has also spoken and moderated discussions at numerous conferences and seminars on entrepreneurship. In this episode, Loren reveals why it's important to be authentic if you want to inspire others and be willing to share your struggles, not just your successes. Loren also shares his perspective on learning from your peers, asking for help, and leveling up together. Visit I'mBeyondBarriers.com where you'll find show notes and links to all the resources in this episode, including the best way to get in touch with Loren. Hi, Loren. Welcome, and thanks for joining me on the show. I'm so excited to finally get to interview you, not the other way around.
My pleasure, Nikki. It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
So, Loren, you are such a revered thought leader and someone that entrepreneurs, and especially so many women entrepreneurs, have been positively influenced by. We look up to you for your wisdom and experience.
That's so nice of you to say. I hope there's some truth to that, but it's really nice of you to say.
Absolutely. I mean, you have shaped a lot of careers, and you've also been a passionate advocate for entrepreneurs as well as for women entrepreneurs. So let's talk first, though, about your own journey and, share the highlights of your career and what you've learned along the way.
Sure. Well, I'm a journalist by trade. I started primarily as a magazine journalist, long form. I love the idea of spending a lot of time really digging into a topic and then writing the definitive story. That became less and less economically viable as my career went on and as the internet arrived. At a certain point, I wound up kind of specializing in going to magazines and helping them rethink and redesign the magazine. And in 2002, I happened to get asked to do that by the new editor of Inc. magazine. And I have an undergraduate degree in business, and I'd done a good bit of business journalism, but I didn't know a lot about entrepreneurship. But it was a great opportunity to go to an interesting magazine and be part of redesigning and rethinking it, a process that I've always really enjoyed. And then a couple of things happened. One, I fell in love with it. I just had no idea how much I would enjoy getting to know entrepreneurs and being part of covering what they do and getting to meet entrepreneurs like you. It just, it changed my life. The other thing that happened is that the economy got even worse for the media industry. And whereas I had been used to the idea that I could go off and find another magazine to help redesign, those opportunities became less and less, at least for me. So I wound up staying at Inc. and really enjoying it. I was there for about 6 years. I was the number 2 editor at the print magazine, and then became the editor-in-chief of the website, Inc.com, just as they were starting to take it more seriously and have it not just be a dumping ground for what the print journalists did. So that was my introduction to editing on the web, which was great. And it helped me get my next job, which was building a web vertical about entrepreneurship for the New York Times, where I started a small business blog called You're the Boss. I was there for about 5 or 6 years, and then I went to Forbes. where I focused on entrepreneurship again. I was their main editor on entrepreneurial stories. I also helped create something that we called Forbes Small Giants, which was our attempt to honor the best small businesses in America each year.
Mm-hmm.
We picked 25 companies that we felt were really special. They all had to be they all had to be profitable. They all had to have been around for 10 years. They had to be giving something back to their community. They had to treat their employees well. We took it very seriously, and we produced great lists of companies that any business could learn from. And that was the main thing that we looked for. For each company, we wanted to be able to say, I've never seen a company do this before.
Right.
This is something different. I love this. And that was what we looked for in the list. And it was a very successful list for them. And then in 2018, I decided to take what I'd learned at each of those companies and try to create something with a partner. We wanted to build the definitive platform for business owners. We decided to call it 21 Hats, which we thought was a good name because it's memorable, and also it indicates a degree of respect. We understand you have to wear a lot of hats to build a business. We understand it's not easy, and we're going to be there to help you. So we called it 21 Hats, what it takes to run a business, and we wanted to create a platform where business owners could read great content and also connect with each other. Didn't quite get as far as we expected to, but that's my journey up
But that's
until
what
now.
the journeys are like. So what strikes me about this is you have this incredible career in journalism and featuring entrepreneurs and business stories, and that love for entrepreneurship made you one, but you also picked an opportune time for launching your own business in the middle of a pandemic.
I believe you did that too, Nikki.
Yes, indeed, I did. We have to, someday we're going to look back and say Lady Luck was on our side. This actually is the third company I'm starting in a downturn. So
I've had lots of people tell me that's the best time to do it, that it's a chance. It's sort of like, if you can do it then, if you can get some traction when the economy isn't great, it gives you an opportunity to figure out what's working and what doesn't work, and then be ready when the economy turns and things pick up.
That's exactly right, because when the economy is down, most people, and even a lot of entrepreneurs, tend to be lost in a sort of scarcity mindset. There's limitations of resources and all kinds of things. So if you are a startup during that time, you have so little to work with that it forces you to be really innovative and really resourceful, but you're also competing against more established businesses that are kind of losing. So they're trying to hold ground while you've got very little to lose. So I found that it actually turns out to be the best time to start. So what has your experience been going through this year specifically?
Well, it's been trying. It's been challenging, as it has for most people. We were really excited about what we were doing, and we did some things that worked really well. We started with an email newsletter that goes out every day. It's designed to give entrepreneurs one place they can go and read all the day's stories from around the web that they need to know about. And as you can imagine, that people kind of got addicted on it during the pandemic when, there was a constant flow of information that people had to find in various places, whether it was about PPP loans or, any
knowing what information to trust. I mean, there's just so much out there.
So we would go out and try to aggregate it, and we were creating some of our own content, but it was mostly aggregation, and that's been successful for us. It's a free newsletter at this point. We also created a podcast. Once a week, I sit down with 3 out of 6 business owners who are regulars on the podcast, and we kind of talk about what's going on. And we started this before the crisis, and I did worry at the time. Are we going to run out of things to talk about? How long will this last? And I kind of figured, maybe we'll see how long it goes, and then maybe I'll get a different group, or we'll change the podcast in some way. We'll mix, and then the crisis hit, and suddenly the conversations became much more dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was a real strength of the podcast. It's been a real strength that we're talking to the same people on a weekly basis because we've seen how they've dealt with this from day one. And it's been a really interesting evolution for all of us. I mean, some of them were, one in particular I think of was kind of in denial in the beginning. He did not want to believe that he might have to actually shut down his retail business. He just couldn't accept it. And when somebody else on the podcast said he better prepare for it, he kind of, lost his temper a little bit. There was some tension. But of course that happened. And, we've been through one challenge after another. We tape on Fridays, and one of our owners came to the podcast directly from a meeting where he had laid off people or furloughed people who represented, I think, 40% of his payroll.
Wow.
And, the owners that I picked are people that I knew well, and they all committed to sharing the real story, what they were really going through, not knowing, of course, what they were going to go through with this pandemic. Yeah. But they all kept to the bargain. They've all really talked about what it's been like. Most of them have stopped paying themselves. Most of them have difficult stories to tell about relationships with employees. Most of them have made difficult decisions about things like when to reopen the office. Not everybody saw that decision the same way. Some people were happy to come back and get out of their apartments and get away from their roommates. Other people were not so happy about it. And it's just been, it's been very easy to come up with topics to talk about on a week in and week out basis. So that's going well. The big thing we were looking to do, though, was to create this platform, which was a place where we would publish great stories, just like I did at Inc. and the Times and Forbes, but give it much more of a community component than we had anywhere else. A little bit it was drawing on my experience at the Times, where starting the small business blog, where I learned a really important and humbling lesson as a journalist, which was that on that blog, however good our content was, the most important part of the blog was the conversations that our content elicited among actual business owners. I read a comment about that, that at the end of the day, for any entrepreneur, it's learning and being able to collaborate or get insights from a fellow entrepreneur rather than someone who's a thought leader but has never done it themselves. And I think there's so much truth to that. So absolutely. And as reporters, we would talk to entrepreneurs, but there's only so many people you can interview for any story. And inevitably, when we posted something, people would weigh in and say, well, I agree with this, but I disagree with that, or here's another way of looking at it. And that was the real value. So that's what I wanted to recreate on this platform. And we designed it. We were really excited about it. But we were probably 3 months away from actually getting it built. The design was complete. The build didn't start. And then we ran into the crisis. And my partner had some cash flow problems at his core business. So we put it on hold. And ultimately, we're in the process of separating now, and I'm going to take this over myself and try to build on what we did get off the ground, the newsletter and the podcast, and eventually get that platform built as well.
Well, you've officially earned your entrepreneurial stripes, my friend.
I don't know if are you an entrepreneur when you try to start a business or when you actually have a business? Because I'm not sure I'm there yet.
When you've gone through the 7th obstacle in 6 weeks, then it's real. So that's incredible, but I have no doubt that you'll find a way through it, and that's what the community is for. And I am so grateful and appreciative of what you're building to bring entrepreneurs together and provide a forum for that kind of community and collaboration. I want to comment about your podcast approach, which I absolutely love. The reason it resonates so much with me is, twofold. One, that instead of having new guests every time, it's almost like reality TV, watching the journey and life unfolding for the same set of people over time as unpredictable things happen. They're navigating through uncertainty, and you're really cataloging all of that on this podcast. So that's super fascinating. The second piece is, that unlike a lot of stories that get told in any kind of media, a lot of the focus is on the overnight success, the rags to riches story. You get into what the night was like, how scary, difficult, painful, restless, stressful it was. And I love that you dig into that, because that is really where everything happens.
Well, Nikki, you've made my day, maybe my week and my month as well. I so appreciate your saying that. That is the goal. That is what we were hoping. I mean, I have to admit, having spent many years in business journalism, I'm partially responsible for the situation you're describing. We business journalists traditionally have focused too much on the huge, rock star successes. It's so tempting.
Glamorous, but
it's glamorous, and those stories have value. They belong there, but they're not representative of what most people go through trying to build a business. And I wanted to capture something that was relevant to the vast majority of businesses who are not on a rocket ship, and that's how I picked the business owners.
Well, actually, even the ones that have experienced the rocket ship, momentum do go through a lot of the same stuff. It's just that nobody really focuses on it or talks about it with the absolute raw authenticity that you express on your podcast, which the feeling for me and as a listener was I just felt less alone. And that was, you
have to have the right people, and it's meeting people. And by the way, I feel like I collect entrepreneurs like that who are willing to share their story. So I remember exactly when I met you. It was at a dinner in Palm Springs at the EY Strategic Growth Forum, and we were sitting outside. It was a cool November night, and they had the fires going, trying to keep us warm. And we went around the table and everybody told their story. And you told an incredibly compelling story and shared, the real side of building a business.
Yeah, and because ironically at that time, it was a lot of, similar way. I mean, I was getting awards and recognitions everywhere that celebrated the successes, but nobody until then had talked about what it took to get from point A to point B, and not just the business journey, but the personal journey and the setbacks and the suffering through that.
There's always a personal side to it.
There's always a personal side, but even frankly, up until I'd spoken to you, I wasn't even comfortable sharing that. And it was a personal conversation that ended up in print, and, what it did for me. And I want you to know that, and to anyone listening, that when you finally come to terms with being able to share your own story in its, in all its ugly details and, the hard, painful things that are very hard to express publicly, it's very liberating because you own your truth. And then from that point on, you realize how powerful it is in inspiring other people that then recognize you as a leader who was able to say something that most other people are too scared to admit in public.
You're absolutely right. And Nikki, I don't know if you realize how few business leaders fully understand what you just said. I think often as a journalist, you wind up in a conversation where a business leader is just intensively focused on really marketing. They want to tell the story they want to tell about the success of their business, and they're looking at it as an opportunity to, drive more revenue. Whereas they would probably do better in the long run if they were just real and talked about what it really takes. And that's a much better way to connect with people than trying to sell them.
Absolutely. I mean, I think if you're trying to create this perfect polished image, people don't relate to that. So, I think through your work in the past, as well as what you're doing right now through the podcast, and I have no doubt that's what the platform will facilitate for entrepreneurs as well. I think for every entrepreneur out there that is struggling alone, it's a resource to realize that you don't have to worry alone. that there's other people to share, learn, grow, connect, and succeed together.
Absolutely.
Do you want to grow your impact as a change agent who ignites transformation in others, but you don't have a proven step-by-step method? Do you want to grow your visibility and influence as a thought leader to inspire others, but you don't know where to begin? The Beyond Barriers High Performance Executive Coach Certification is designed for experienced leaders who want to grow their impact and influence. Join this exclusive community of high achievers, advance your career as a leader, and experience the joy of helping others grow. Go to IamBeyondBarriers.com and register for the webinar to learn more.
So, what are some of the gut-wrenching moments that you didn't anticipate, or maybe one lesson that you personally sort of learned that even as someone who's been a student of business for this long, something that surprised you personally?
Oh gosh, there have been lots of surprises. I have to, I don't want to claim to be an entrepreneur yet. Nobody's paid me a dime for anything we offer. So it's too soon. I want to be clear about that. I've got a ways to go. And I also want to be clear, I haven't done what you did and what most entrepreneurs do in terms of, taking the financial risk to be an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. I found a partner, and we agreed that it would be mutually beneficial to build this platform together. And I brought experience with content and community and contacts with lots of business organizations around the country and great entrepreneurs who I knew would, participate in a podcast or talk for a story or something like that. And frankly, he put up the money. He paid me a salary, as well as financing the development of the things that we built. So it's not a true reflection of the entrepreneurial experience for most people. Mm-hmm. I've had it very easy. I'm also a little bit older than a lot of entrepreneurs. I have 2 kids, but they're out of college. So the financial risk for me is not as great. Now we are coming to a crossroads, and it is, I'm going to own it. It's going to be mine, and I'm going to be risking some of my own money. So I'm kind of excited about that. I guess there hasn't been anything that hugely surprised me. The disappointment was that we didn't get the platform built before the pandemic. Because as you were saying about, going through tough times, I really believe that this would have been a wonderful, as awful as it's been, the crisis, it would have been a wonderful opportunity to prove that we had value. I think we could have helped a lot of people. And it's a shame we didn't get the chance to do that because we were so close. So that's the gut-wrenching aspect of it.
The impact of the pandemic is going to last a long time. So I think there's, plenty of opportunity to make a difference to the folks you're trying to help. And I know as someone who is in your target audience as an entrepreneur, I relate to it a lot because that feeling of isolation, of not knowing who to ask for advice, not knowing what to even ask. Sometimes you're just facing the problem and you don't even know how to frame the question. And if you don't know the question, you don't know how to, who to ask, where to ask, and having that forum, I think, is tremendously valuable. So, with that said, you're, as you mentioned, you've been an observer of businesses and business owners. Given that unique vantage point, what are some of the common traits of successful leaders that you've seen over the years?
Oh, that's an interesting question. One of the things, and I'd love to hear your response to this, one of the things that I've given a lot of thought to and talked to people about a lot is the notion that to be an entrepreneur, I think you really have to be incredibly stubborn. You have to be headstrong. You have to be willing to keep going when a lot of people tell you, you're nuts. That's not going to work. Or why don't you just get a job? Why would you take that risk? Why would you put in those hours? It's crazy. And yet people do it and they keep going. But the interesting thing to me is that can only work for so long.
Mm-hmm.
you have to have that inner something that drives you forward. But at some point, you have to start taking advice too. You have to. You can't know everything you need to know to build a business. So you have to be willing to listen to other people and sometimes do things that seem counterintuitive to you.
Yeah.
So I think there's a really interesting tension there between having the drive to keep going no matter what, but also an awareness that there are times when you do have to listen to someone else's opinion, and how you calibrate that, I think, is a real challenge that determines, success or failure for a lot of people.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I would have described it as just entrepreneurs are just a bundle of contradictions. Somehow, if you find the fine balance between the two opposing sides, you can find success. If you lean too much on one side or the other, you're going to go through some tough experiences and hardships and suffering. Like you said, on one hand, you have to have absolute conviction in your belief, whether it's about an idea or a mission. On the other hand, you have to have the humility to surround yourself with people better than you and more experienced than you. You have to have the optimism, but you also have to have a level of paranoia to, keep going. So there's so many contradictions, and
there's so many examples of that. On the 21 Hats podcast, one of the things we talk about a lot is pricing, which I think is something that people really struggle with. It's just. It's really hard for a lot of people. And I think if there's a common mistake that business owners make, they tend to underprice what they absolutely do. It happens all the time. And what they don't focus on is, if you raise your prices, you might lose some business, but you might lose bad business. You might lose customers that you don't really want, and you might end up with more revenue. In fact, you're very likely to end up with more revenue, not less, and more time to do whatever you do well. So it's something that you can't just dismiss. And that doesn't mean everybody should raise their prices, but everybody should think about raising their prices for sure. And there are a lot of people who just can't pull the trigger on it. They're afraid that everybody's going to disappear. And it's very unlikely that everybody's going to disappear if you raise your prices. But again, who do you listen to? Who do you trust? How do you make that decision? How much do you rely on, the wisdom of others? How much do you decide for yourself? There's no right answer to that. I mean,
the description of good judgment really sums it up in some ways. Of good judgment comes from experience, but experience comes from bad judgment. So in some way, in order to get there, you have to have made a lot of mistakes and learn from that, and you just get better over time of gaining that self-awareness and knowing when to ask for help.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about women entrepreneurs and women leaders. You and I met each other through the EY Winning Women program, which we're both huge fans of.
Absolutely.
And you've been very keenly involved in that, huge supporter and ally. What are some of the things you've observed about women entrepreneurs and women leaders in general, with that kind of close proximity and seeing so many people over a long period of time?
First of all, I just want to say that program is just a fabulous program. I almost hate to talk about it because I kind of like keeping it as my little secret, at least among journalists. I started going close to 10 years ago to that event, and I really just went because of the Winning Women program. It's a fabulous event. They spend an incredible amount of money on it, and they have big name entertainers there. Jay Leno used to go, and they have big rock bands and all kinds of things. But I went for the one program because looking for businesses, as I said before, that I like to cover, those who are not necessarily on a rocket ship to success. Right. The Winning Women program finds women like you who have, great ideas, a great business, but maybe needs some some coaching, can use some support,
and visibility.
Visibility, and gives them the opportunity to get that. And they introduce a new cohort every year. And I would be the only journalist there year after year meeting them. And I don't know why, because it was such a great use of my time. There was nowhere else in the world I could go where I would meet more terrific people in 1, 2, or 3 day period than I could there. So I'm a little confused as to why it's not better known, at least among journalists. I know it's well known among entrepreneurs, but I've made so many great contacts through it. And gosh, it's hard for me to sit here and think what they have in common. I don't have a good answer for you to that. I don't think. I think I've met a lot of women who aren't part of that program, and you'll know this better than I do, and you can tell me whether I'm right about this or not. But I've heard a lot of women say that they think women entrepreneurs are not as confident as male entrepreneurs. They don't have
it's
that.
The risk-taking factor that's hugely different. And in my own experience with EY winning women, what struck me was what a small percentage, what is it, less than 1 to 2% of women-owned businesses even cross $1 million, which in itself
is mind-boggling.
It's absolutely mind-boggling, and it's a little bit like winning the Olympics because no one else showed up, and while the recognition is a tremendous honor and a great opportunity to build community, but it's also reflective of how little scale so many women-owned businesses achieve.
So to answer your question, then I would say this, I don't think the Winning Women program is representative of women entrepreneurs at large. It's a different group.
It's a different league. Yeah.
They are women. There is a wide range of businesses that I've met there, from quite small to quite large. But they don't suffer from a lack of confidence by and large. They wouldn't be there if they did. Right. And so it's a different group. I think they're very different from the women entrepreneurs I meet elsewhere. So I look at them as just being great entrepreneurs who happen to be women.
Yeah.
And that's why I go there before the pandemic. That's why I went there every year and hope I will again someday. But it's hard to generalize across all of them because they're all different. They all bring different strengths.
No, absolutely. Although, I think a lot of the research has already revealed that the confidence factor does make up for a lot because it's, those self-limiting beliefs about whether you can or whether you can't. And,
men are more willing to fake it till they make it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Well, I think the precision of saying, well, I haven't, checked all the boxes, so maybe I'm not ready to go in to raise funding or hire my first employee. And so much of business growth comes from leverage and access. You need access to resources and relationships and capital. And that confidence factor makes a huge difference whether you're willing to keep the access and take it.
I will say this. I'm not a huge fan of the venture capital industry. I think, there are clearly companies with ambitions that require venture capital, and there's no other way they could be built. But I think the system destroys a lot of good businesses too. Right. I think, unfortunately, there are a lot of businesses that take venture capital that had they not taken it, they probably would have succeeded on their own terms. But once they bring in venture investors, they've got to exceed on someone else's terms. And maybe the business wasn't cut out for that and they don't make it. And the venture investors probably don't really care because that's part of their business model. All they need is 1 out of 10 to succeed big. And, the other 9 don't matter. But some of those other 9 could have been great businesses. So I think there's one one thing I've observed, I hate when all the focus about women entrepreneurs is on whether they get venture capital or not. Mm-hmm. Because, yeah, of course they should get venture capital the way men do. I mean, they have every right to, have their businesses ruined by venture capital that men do. But that's not the deciding factor for most businesses, is whether they're going to succeed or not. And there are plenty of other challenges and hurdles that women face. And those challenges and hurdles, I think, don't get as much attention as the venture capital ones.
I completely agree. I think something about the whole Silicon Valley glamour factor tends to overemphasize fundraising as some kind of major achievement, and celebrates less the whole idea of making a first dollar of revenue on your own. Organic growth is way harder and it's more sustainable. And we tend to sort of ignore how hard that is to not only do it the first time, but to keep.
But also how valuable it is.
It is. The best money you can raise is by earning a customer.
Even people who take venture capital will tell you the best thing you can do is to put off taking the capital as long as you possibly can. If you can get your company as far as possible without it, you'll be in a stronger position when you do take it. And obviously, for some companies, it's the right decision.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, going through that experience myself, what I value the most was visibility. And that's why, your involvement in the entrepreneurial community was so relevant and important, because a lot of women don't necessarily share their stories, or feel like it's a little bit like bragging, and self-promotion is uncomfortable.
Yeah, men don't have that problem.
Yeah. But on the other hand, if other women can't see it, you can't be it. So the importance of visible role models is very important in changing the narrative and changing the statistics of that. And what I think the EY Winning Women program really did for so many of us, and I can certainly say that for myself, is my life changed after that point. My skills didn't, my vision didn't, my business success was earned. But what fundamentally happened only because of that program and because of you and other folks that supported that was visibility. It gave me a spotlight, it put a spotlight, gave me a voice, it gave me a platform to make a difference. And then through that, inspire a lot of other people as well. And then also normalize success in many ways that made it possible to take even bigger leaps. So from that standpoint, you cataloging stories of entrepreneurs and being able to share that, it is changing the narrative. It does change how people view themselves.
You did a terrific podcast with Sherry Deutschman, who is a Winning Women alum, who started an amazing company and has an amazing personal story. And I think it's a great example of what you're talking about. I mean, she built that business on her own. She did it, by the way, without any debt, without any investment, but built a $40 million business, just a great business, and ultimately sold it. I think that for her, the real value probably was, people heard her story and what a great story she had to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking forward, into, we're still in the COVID era. Things are still uncertain.
Yeah. When's that going to end, Nikki?
Yeah, I know. I'm looking for your prediction, Loren. You're the one. So like most people in business, we're all sort of, trying to make decisions as we've jumped off the cliff and we're building the airplane on the way down, trying to figure it out. What advice would you give to people from everything you've learned and observed and studied? What can someone, guide themselves with in this very uncertain time? Not just now, but we're also in this digital age where there's artificial intelligence and automation that is disrupting the traditional way of doing business. Living with uncertainty is the norm. It's not getting used to it or waiting for it to go away. What advice would you give?
Well, I think my best advice is probably not to take advice from someone like me who hasn't actually done it, but instead...
You're very humble, Loren.
Well, very true. Instead, find your tribe, find your group, find other people going through it. And it can't just be one person. You need a diversity of opinion. I think about the conversations we had on the podcast. You might have 5 people saying one thing, and then one person says something completely different, and everybody's mouth hangs open. Paul Downs is one of our business owners. He owns a company that makes high-end custom conference tables. And, he's facing a tough time right now. Not only is there an economic crisis and people aren't spending money the way they were before, but there's this whole work from home thing. Who knows how many high-end conference tables people are going to want to buy going forward. Now, I think a lot of us are going to go back into the office eventually, but not this year, and maybe not next year, and who knows? So he's got a lot to think about, and a lot of people have been telling him, "Oh, you need to pivot. You need to pivot." And I mean, that's what you hear from everybody. And for a lot of people, it makes sense. I believe you pivoted with your business. There are times what you have no choice, but Paul in one of our podcasts had this great comment that everybody's telling him, maybe you should make desks for work from home offices. He charges $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 for a great custom-made conference table. He can't start making $300 or $400 desks
home desk,
somebody from home and compete with Wayfair or IKEA or whoever else does that. That doesn't make any sense for him. That's their competency. It's not his. So his decision has been basically, I'm going to try to keep my powder dry. I'm going to sell as many tables as I can. There are people out there who are still buying, a lot of it, some of it's government offices, some of it's military. There are people who are still buying from him. So he's going to serve as many customers as he can find, but he knows he's going to do a small percentage of his expected revenues. He's going to have to lay off people, furlough people. But he's going to try to do whatever he can just to make sure he's here when, it comes back, when the pandemic is under control, the recovery begins in full, and people start, going back into offices and buying those tables again. So that's a long answer to your question, but I think there's no one answer for anybody. And if you're looking for advice, I think you got to talk to a lot of people and weigh their opinions.
Well, for everyone out there listening and hoping to figure out the way, I think that's what the 21 Hats community is about. And that's what the resources that you provide that help people navigate through all of the uncertainty and risk. So I hope they'll go check it out and see, how they can benefit from finding their tribe and getting answers in the midst of all of this darkness and uncertainty. So thank you, Loren, and loved having you on the show. And thanks for sharing your wisdom.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity. If people go to 21hats.com, they can find both the daily email and the podcast. But Nikki, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to the Beyond Barriers podcast. There are thousands of podcasts out there, and we are so grateful that you've chosen to listen to ours. If you enjoyed the show, please tell a friend about it and subscribe to get new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Visit IamBeyondBarriers.com, where you'll find show notes and links to all resources for each show, including the best way to connect with our guests. See you next episode.